Hello, welcome back to the sewing room. I was recently teaching a class at a fabric store and one of the ladies brought in this fantastic vintage machine and she was so excited that I was so excited. But one of the things I wanted to do with her was go through her manual and go through her accessories and let her know what all the fabulous things that her machine could do that she had bought when she got married, I believe 50 years ago. Maybe even, I think it was used when she bought it. So that would put it at either late 50s, early 60s to late 60s. I don't know. Didn't get the full story about it. But anyway, one of the things that her machine can do that I told her about was create a chain stitch. And she did not know what that was, had never heard of it, didn't know how to use it. So I thought I would just take a minute and talk to you guys about how to chain stitch, which kinds of machines are most likely to be able to do a chain stitch, and why you would want to. One of the machines that can do it is this touch and sew right here, so let's get started. Okay, so from what I can tell, single thread chain stitching is most likely to be found as a capability in machines that were made in the 1960s and 1970s. As I said, the machine that I saw was a Brother pace setter. I believe was from the 1950s or 1960s, not 100% sure. Beautiful machine. I wish I had my camera with me. I think I will be taking my camera with me from now on to those classes so that I can, you know, get some shots for you guys. I would have loved to show this machine off to you. Anyway, apparently this feature is also very common among a lot of touch and sews from the 60s and 70s. Some Kenmore machines, some Janome machines, and then some, I believe Janome also produced machines that were badged New Home and White. So all of those machines have the possibility of having chain stitch capabilities. Now, I think they all also need special accessories to make that work, so I will walk you through how that works on the touch and sew, and then maybe you can recognize if you happen to have a machine that can do a chain stitch in your collection. Now, a cover stitch machine can create a 2-thread chain stitch. If you're using a chain stitch on this kind of machine, that's going to be a single thread chain stitch. So it's actually one of the benefits of using this kind of stitch versus our kind of normal sewing machine stitch, which is a lock stitch, is that you don't have a bobbin. You basically totally ignore the bobbin area, and so you only have one thread coming through the top of the machine. So if you're doing a lot of basting together projects or test sewing, and you don't want to be worried about your bobbin running out, chain stitch is a great option. But its primary use is actually for basting. And I would say the caveat, I often do baste and then stitch directly over that basting. If you do that with a chain stitch, you're not really going to be able to take that stitch out. Now, if you do that even with a lock stitch, you kind of can't get it out. But the primary advantage of chain stitching versus lock stitching is that it's very, very, very easy and fast to remove. So you want to take advantage of that when you're using it to do whatever you're going to do. But it's especially, again, basting, but let's think about what kind of basting that works for the best. Now you can also use it to just mark a hem, to stitch a line on something before you know that it's final, before you press it up. Some of my 1960s sewing patterns I've made, I've noticed use basting for things like marking the fold edge of a lapel, or the fold edge of the front of a dress, or the fold edge of your of a cuff that's a one-piece cuff that you're folding, and then that gives you a lovely line to kind of press against and to stitch along, with the expectation that you're going to remove that stitching later. So if you've done that with a chain stitch, it's going to be way, way easier to do than if you've done it with a lock stitch, or if you're a little bit, let's say, economical with your time, is what I would say. My mom might call me a tiny bit lazy about some things. I'm often very tempted to just not take out any of those basting stitches, but then I'll be like out somewhere and I'll see, you know, a loose one on my sleeve and I'll just be kind of picking at it. It's not really how you become a great conversation partner at lunch, let's just say that. So anyway, great for that. And then also it's used quite a bit if you're going to attach something like collars or trim. If it's the kind of collar or trim that you can't put through your wash, right? So if you have a temporary, like a fur collar or some other leather or some other kind of collar that you can't put through the wash, you would use a chain stitch to attach it to your garment. It's going to be a little bit more secure than just hand basting, but it's also going to be fast and easy to remove when you're ready to launder the garment. Oh, also, I love this. One of the books that I looked at suggested using a chain stitch to hem when you know the hem is not final. Like say you haven't hung the skirt out yet, or your client hasn't been able to try on the dress to check for length, then you might use chain stitch for that hem, just so that you can really see how the hem is settling before you finalize the hems. Another fantastic use for basting in general, but especially chain stitched basting, is when you have two edges of fabric that you know you want to keep together as you're constructing your garment, but you don't want them to stay together after. So like a lapped zipper insertion or certain kinds of pockets. It's fantastic for that because it's going to hold it nice and even. Now, a lot of us have learned instructions for placing zippers where you kind of have to, in my opinion, one of the hardest things about zipper positioning is dealing with the fabric around the zipper when you want the zipper to be hidden, when you want the zipper teeth to be hidden away after you finish sewing it. You have to if you're doing that without actually stitching that edge closed first, you have to be so careful and precise in your pressing and sewing and everything else. If it's already just stitched shut, it gives you a lot less degrees of freedom to mess up. And I personally really like that. I had one of my beginning sewing students, I was showing her how to place a zipper for if she were doing like a cushion or something, and we did it that way. We basted the seam shut, we put the zipper in, we took the basting out, and she turns to me and she says, "Why do people think sewing in zippers is hard?" And I said, "Well, I just showed you the fastest, easiest way. It's not going to be the best way for every style of zipper or every kind of thing, but this way 100% works." So it's just that much less, to worry about. So anyway, there's a little aside about zippers. Let's get chain stitching. Right now, your first clue that your machine can and should be able to make a chain stitch would be if you find the chain stitching stuff and its accessories. Now this is a 626. This is an accessory box for 638, and I will freely admit that when I am at thrift stores and I see an accessory box, even if it's for a machine I don't own, I buy it. Kind of just in case this kind of thing is in there. Now sadly, this particular one did not come with the accessories that I would use for chain stitching. Instead, what we have here is a replacement needle plate. Let me get that where you can see it. And zoom. So this is the needle plate, and you can recognize kind of, this is your straight stitch needle plate, which you can tell because it just has the one very small hole here. And if you flip it over on the back, it's very smooth everywhere. And these are great. And normally what's installed in the machine is the zigzag needle plate. I'll show you one of those in a better way that you can see it in a minute. But just so you know, that's what that is. That's your straight stitch needle plate. And you use this, I use these most often if I'm using a fabric that is a little slippery or keeps kind of getting sucked into the machine. Switching to a straight stitch needle plate is going to make a big difference even if you don't have a straight stitch foot for this machine. Alright, in contrast, here's my actual accessory box for this machine. I don't have the original, which is sad, but what can you do? And again, we see here's my straight stitch needle plate. Very, again, smooth on the back, and the zigzag one is already in there. I'll show you that when I take it out. And then this one is kind of, you might think to yourself, what is that? Sorry, I'm trying to see how to show you the best way. You see that the hole here is a little bit bigger than the straight stitch, but not a zigzag. And the real telltale that this is for chain stitching is if we flip it over and the back looks like that. Doesn't always look exactly like that, but basically instead of being smooth, there'll be some sort of apparatus, and that is what actually helps the chain stitch form in the machine. And for this machine, there are two other accessories that you need to be able to do a chain stitch. One is this, which I think, let me get that in focus, that. And then part number 3 is here. Now I'm not going to be able to tell you just from memory how this works, so I'm going to refer to the manual to actually set this up. But those are the 3 pieces you need to turn at least a touch and sew from this era into a chain stitch machine. Alright, now the machine is unplugged and I'm going to start by just unthreading it. Making sure you can see that. Now the way this needle plate comes up is you actually have to go to this switch over here and pull it all the way to the unlock position, and then you can take that out. And this is what the needle plate that we use the most often for this machine looks like. It has a wider spot here, that's so that when your needle goes zig and zag it won't break. And the back is nice and smooth. There's a little bit, it's not perfectly smooth, but there's no like extra device back there. So that's what that looks like. And unfortunately, if you're sometimes a little bit rough on your machine, you might see some damage right around there, and that just means that there occasionally things have rubbed up against this, and oops. And here's my manuals page about chain stitching. Single thread chain stitching looks like regular straight stitching on top, but is a series of interlocking loops on the underside of the fabric. The stitches are produced by the needle thread alone, so you do not need a bobbin thread or a bobbin. Because the stitches are formed by a single thread, the interlocked loops unravel easily. The entire line of stitching can be removed with just a pull on the thread end. Also, the loop formation makes them less taut than regular straight stitches. That's what makes chain stitching flexible. Where to use chain stitching: basting, trial seams for fitting, construction guidelines, zipper openings, linings, and interfacings. Stay stitching, fastening removable trimming, hemming curtains that may need to be altered, sewing temporary tucks to extend the life of children's clothes and curtains and linings that might shrink, attaching hem tape, and making stay chains to anchor linings or to hold belts or shoulder pads in place. Fantastic. So I've got my hand wheel turned so that my take-up lever is at its highest point. I already took out the slide plate. I need to remove the bobbin. On this machine you flip up that guy and then you take out your bobbin. There's my bobbin. I already took out my throat plate. I need to put in my chain stitch throat plate. Look how shiny that is. That's how little I've used that. Lower that. And this slides in here. There are these little grooves. And then I'm going to switch this back to regular, which is all the way to the right. Insert my bobbin case cover in the bobbin case. So that's what this guy is. Finger lift tab goes to the right. That guy. Alright, so the part that sticks up goes to the top, and this guy goes to the right. I think you and I would both be able to see better if I hadn't put the needle plate in yet. You know what? I'll change order. I'll put that in first. So I feel like I can't see. There, much easier. That holds in position. So basically that replaces the bobbin. Putting this back. And that feels nice and secure. That's in. On this machine, this just kind of comes open. You don't have to unscrew anything, which is nice. And then this is going to sit right there. Makes a nice tight little fit there. And then in theory this could close with that in place, but we'll see. Ah, voila! Now threading the machine when you have it set for chain stitch is a little different. I'm going to temporarily stitch in a ruffle on a petticoat that I don't know how long I want the petticoat to be. So I am going to do it in black, which will contrast with the ruffle, but whatever. Okay, so this is coming across here. Here's my first part of my threading. You can still see that, I hope. Coming down through the tension knob. Here we go. Through the take-up lever. There we go. And then basically having this extra step coming through here, and all the way. No. I need to be very careful about this. For some reason my needle was in the left position. It needs to be centered because otherwise it will not go through that correctly. It would actually break the needle. So always watch that. In fact, a lot of times when I'm switching to straight stitching with a machine that can do zigzag, I'll put little pieces of tape kind of in my way so that I could still change the setting, but I'm more likely to notice that I shouldn't when I put something on here. Today I'm just gonna kind of wing it, but we'll see how that goes. Threading the needle. Voila. And all should be all set. Adjust thread tension. Chain stitching requires approximately the same needle thread tension as regular straight stitching, provided the same kind of thread is used. So for right now I'm not going to change anything, but when I'm checking the stitching, I'm going to take a look and make sure that it's not too tight or too short. I just want to note here that I am using a thread stand with an extra high or extra big spool of thread. There's nothing wrong with the way this machine is designed to hold thread. It just can't hold the super huge cone of thread that I like to use for my basic colors like black, white, and navy. And so just, you know, that's why I'm doing that. There's nothing wrong with the way the machine was designed. Just for some close-ups here, that's the front. Just looks like regular stitching, and then in the back it's just a little fatter looking because it's kind of it's wrapping around. because I don't know for sure if this is all the way I want it to be in the end, I'm going to be careful here and not stitch over the end where I started. I'm going to stop right before I hit that, hopefully. Because that way, if I want to take it out, it will be a lot easier to take out, which is, again, the whole point of doing a chain stitch. Now we'll see. I think for this machine, there's a kind of a procedure. I'm going to read it. There's like a procedure for taking. Raise presser foot, hold end of chain with your left hand, turn handle slowly toward you with your right hand until the needle is all the way down into the needle hole. So I guess I'm scooping all this out of the way. Oh, this is so against everything that I feel like I know about sewing. Okay. Oh, you can hear it. You can hear the chain come off. Oh, you can hear it. Can you hear that? Once it's down there, then you turn the handle slowly away from you, pulling gently on chain, which will unravel as needle raises. Again, totally against everything I always tell people about sewing machines, but let's do it. And it worked. Holy cow. Okay. Now for this machine, according to the manual, if you want to stop when you're not off the edge of a fabric, so this is actually probably what I really should have done. You want to stop where you're ready to stop, and then you want to stop with your take-up lever at its highest point. So right there. Raise your presser foot. Again, against everything I always tell people, but you know, exceptions always exist. With your finger, pull the thread through the take-up lever, forming a loop between the take-up lever and the stitch guide. So I'm just going to grab that, pull forward. Some cover stitch machines use this kind of technique to kind of free the work from the machine. So I've got my loop. Pass scissors under presser foot so as to draw the loop down to the left of the foot. So, voila. Hold the loop and cut the thread close to the end of the stitching. So I've got some tension here. I'm just going to cut that right there. Remove fabric from machine by pulling it straight back away from you. Now it's supposed to pull the loose thread. Ah, it did. So it pulled, when I pulled it back, that loose thread got pulled to the underside, and that forms what it calls a temporary lock. And then if you wish to secure it, you can fold this back over and kind of stitch it down. Now, the main benefit, as I've said many times, of chain stitching is how easy it is to take out. So let's zoom all the way in. Let's see what that looks like. So again, here's my chain stitching from the front. Just looks like regular stitching. And then here's my chain stitching from the back, and I think it pulls out this way. If I can get a loose here's my loose end. And I'm pretty sure, whoop, I hope you saw that. Here's a loose end, and I'm pretty sure I can just pull it, and it will just pop right out. Voila. Here's an example of some basting that I really need to take out. It's even in the wrong color. And there is the lace from that petticoat just barely peeking out, which I would say is a success. We'll see. I need to actually put it on and make sure that I like where the skirt hits on me. When I wore it without the petticoat, I thought it seemed a little too long, but of course you can't really assess those things until you see it with all of the undergarments, and in this case that includes a petticoat. No one has asked me, but I did want to do a quick test of this technique on knit fabric. This is from the front, and this is from the back. You can see the chain stitch of the chain stitching, and it sewed really well. I didn't change the needle. I probably should have changed to a stretch needle, but in any case, the seam does feel nice and flexible. I'm not going to say stretchy, but I'm going to test what happens if I'm in focus. Come on, get in there. What happens if I pull on it? So this is with the width of the fabric, so it's as stretchy as the fabric is going to be. So always take this with a grain of salt. If most of the seams in your garment, like say you're making a skirt or even a lot of dresses, your knit fabric isn't going to be as stretchy in the up and down as is in the across. And so sometimes you can get away with a less stretchy or even a pretty much non-stretchy seam for the up and down portions. So don't work yourself up into knots about whether your seam will be stretchy enough unless you really need it to stretch in that area. But let's see if this seam pops if I pull on it. And so far, no, it's pretty strong. I am feeling some resistance from the seam when I pull on it, so it's not, there it goes. Okay, yeah, so it is poppable. So if you're looking for a construction stitch for knit fabrics, chain stitch might not be the best option, even though it does look like it should have a little bit more give. It probably does still have a little bit more give than a straight lock stitch, but it isn't really stretchy enough to be used for knit fabrics. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time here, thanks for coming. I hope you had a good time, and I hope to see you next time. That did not work.